Hello and happy birthday, America. It's the Independence Day show, and by that I mean it's a normal show, but I'm dropping it on Independence Day. Hello, friends. Joining me today is a very special guest. He is the host of NPR's Extremely American, which is out for season 2. It's Heath Druzin, who is really, really great. I think you're going to love our conversation. It's the second season of his podcast, and this takes place in a small town in Idaho that is trying to take over for Christian nationalists. It's real fascinating. Heath is real cool, and I think you will love our conversation, which starts at 24 minutes and 30 seconds. But as always, I've got your headlines and sound bites here on Thursday, July 4th, 2024. And I will not be hosting a Hangout tonight because, well, number one, it's the 4th of July, and I'm not sure if people are going to be available. Not that that really matters. I'm always happy to host when anybody comes, but I'm actually on the road tonight, headed back down to the National Conservation Training Center to be part of the event for the Student Climate Congress, a bunch of high school and on their way to college students who are into environmentalism and sustainability. Always fun. Very much looking forward to that for the day. But that is tomorrow. I'm headed down tonight. I will miss you, but we'll get back after it and do more Hangouts, maybe even more than one a week on some weeks. Seeing as that everything seems to be falling apart, that's the way it feels. The wheels are coming off of our country, our democracy, President Biden's campaign, his health, and there's just so much concern around. I see it, I feel it, I hear it from so many of you, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I'm here for you. It's what I do. It's where I'm supposed to be. I hope that you will stay here with me. And if you aren't already a subscriber to the show and you want to go down on the ship with me, it would be awesome because I can't do it without you. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Of course, I'm always going to try to strike an optimistic tone because I'm an optimistic person, always looking for the best in people and the times. Whether I'm right or wrong, I'm here with you for it. So thank you very, very much. Let's get to those headlines from yesterday. Let's just start with the biggest story, which is speculation about the President of the United States. Will he or won't he continue running? Will he step down? Will he retire right now, quit the presidency right now, allowing Kamala Harris to ascend to the presidency? Then Republicans wouldn't allow her to appoint a vice president. And then Mike Johnson, Christian nationalist, would be a heartbeat away from taking control of America. So, yeah, a lot of speculation about that. And it's a story obviously developing kind of hour to hour. And everybody's yelling at each other and saying that they're gaslighting each other about it. But the bottom line is this is President Biden's choice, it would look like. And he's told allies that he was staying in. He met with governors yesterday, and apparently he's also privately confided that he's only got a few days to figure it out. If he craters in the polls, most analysts and pundits that I trust are saying there's no way he's going to continue running. But who knows? Only President Biden and his family. He has a interview with George Stephanopoulos that's going to start airing on Friday, and then they're going to, I guess, have the rest of it on the Sunday shows, but we'll see what happens with that. And over the next couple of days, obviously, we're all paying attention to this moment to moment. So that's about all I'll say about that unfolding story. And today is election day in the UK. That's right. Britain could bring a fundamental realignment to the country's politics. Voters expected to oust the Conservative-led government after 14 years in power and elect the center-left Labour Party, which has maintained a double-digit lead in polls for more than a year. So that is happening today on our Independence Day. It's election day. They called for an election. It's different days, obviously, all the time. But certainly worth mentioning, and we will know the results. It's interesting to see Germany and Italy and France going one way, and the UK maybe snapping back as a result of them going that way when they Brexited, which was a conservative, very bad idea, and they're now getting the backlash for it. All right, well, let's come back home because today is supposed to be one of the busiest travel days of the year, and it's going to be a busy travel summer, all analysts on the issue are predicting. But Polls suggest the public isn't satisfied with the economy, but travelers heading out for July 4th holiday, like me, can expect plenty of company on the road this year. I'm reading nearly 71 million people will be on the move over July 4th week, according to AAA, a new record that exceeds pre-pandemic levels. So there you go. It's lower gas prices and a humming economy tend to do that. How about that story? Another economic story, progress on inflation. Federal Reserve officials at their June meeting indicated that inflation is moving in the right direction, but not quickly enough for them to lower interest rates, according to minutes released yesterday. All right, a few legal stories that I want to mention. First of all, the Biden administration settled with GM, General Motors, after determining that the company sold millions of cars that were more polluting than they had claimed. After Monday's ruling on presidential immunity, U.S. allies are now even more concerned about the reliability of American power, according to a story from the New York Times. Across Asia and Europe, where allied leaders have grown accustomed to dealing with threats from authoritarian leaders in Russia, North Korea, and China, the idea that they might also have to deal with an unfettered American president is an unsettling prospect. So I thought that was an interesting story. And a judge appointed by George W. Bush, in case you're wondering, yesterday blocked the Biden administration from enforcing a new rule against discrimination on the basis of gender identity in healthcare. The judge in Mississippi sided with 15 Republican-led states, district judge, by the way, agreeing with 15 Republican-led states that sued to challenge this rule, arguing that it exceeded the administration's authority. And what would it do? Well, it would extend protections in Obamacare, extend them to transgender Americans. And now it looks like that's not going to happen, at least temporarily. Ooh, they hate the trans people. And finally, in legal news, the defense for Senator Bob Menendez rested yesterday without the New Jersey Democrat testifying at his New York bribery trial. Lawyers for Senator Menendez called several witnesses over 2 days in an effort to counter 7 weeks of testimony and hundreds of exhibits and communications introduced by Manhattan federal prosecutors. Ooh, I think he's going down, but don't let that stop you from running again. He's still running as an independent, apparently. We'll see what happens with Senator Bob Menendez, but unlike Republicans, Democrats hold our politicians to account. Well, not always, but a lot of the time we definitely do, especially when they commit crimes as serious as this one, the ones he's being accused of. Let's go to news on the bird flu. A fourth person has tested positive for bird flu in the outbreak linked to dairy cows. This time in Colorado, the CDC said Wednesday a dairy worker at a farm where cows had also tested positive for the virus had eye symptoms and has recovered after getting the antiviral drug Tamiflu. So that is good news that this person recovered. I think I might have mentioned that story on yesterday's news segment, but a little bit of a development there. New campaign finance records show that the disgraced former President Donald Trump's Political Action Committee paid a legal firm representing the former president's longtime advisor and former guest of mine on Stand Up Pete Dominic, Boris Epshteyn, ahead of his pending criminal trial in Arizona. So, that's interesting. Trump's basically paying for his guy's legal bills. I don't know what that could possibly mean. And let's go overseas. Israeli forces killed a senior Hezbollah commander in a drone strike in southern Lebanon on Wednesday, prompting the Lebanese militia to retaliate with a heavy rocket barrage across the border as international diplomats scrambled to prevent an all-out war. So that ain't good. We'll see what happens over there. The U.S. suspended avocado imports from Mexico over security concerns, highlighting its dependence on the region for supplies of the popular fruit. Prepare for avocado prices to go up. And those are your headlines here on the 4th of July, Independence Day. So let's now get to what I brought for sound bites. Plenty of those today as well. Well, let's get this out of the way. This is the disgraced former president, Donald J. Trump, who's a real piece of shit. And you don't believe me? Well, you all believe me. Then listen to this. This is him being secretly recorded on the golf course, talking to a few of his sycophants there on the course. He's sitting in his golf cart, which he's driving, and he trashes both President Biden and the Vice President Kamala Harris. This is about 30 seconds. I'm sorry to have to do it to you. But here it is, he in his own words.
How did I do with the debate the other night?
Oh, fantastic.
He kicked that old broken down pile of crap.
Yeah.
It's a bad guy. He just quit, He's quitting the race. Is that right? Yep, I got him out of the race. And that means we have Kamala. I think she's going to be better. She's so bad. She's so pathetic. It's so amazing. It's just so fucking bad. So I just can't imagine. But can you imagine that guy dealing with Putin and the president of China, who's a fierce person? He's a fierce man, a very tough guy. And they see him, they probably he can't. But they just announced he's probably quitting.
Good.
Okay?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Just keep knocking him out, right? Thank you.
All right, there he is. I think when he says Kamala's better, I think that he means she might be easier to beat. I wonder. That's what I'm hearing than he thinks that President Biden is. So we'll know within a matter of days or weeks, I suppose, who is going to be the nominee. And yesterday, a whole bunch of governors met with President Biden at the White House. They came out, and Wes Moore represented them, at least in this clip, and took some questions from reporters, basically just made a statement of support. Here's the governor of Maryland. He is a beautiful black man, very charismatic, super smart. I've interviewed him a couple of times, an Iraq veteran, and of course, just you can hear how good he is here, but he is doing what he needs to do today, at least, or yesterday, which is to show support for President Biden.
I would say this. In November, we've got a clear choice. The president was very clear that he is in this to win this. And the president is our nominee. The president is our party leader. And the president has told us, and he was very clear back there, that he is in this to win this. And so for people, I would say, and listen, we're governors. We don't do hand-wringing. That's not what we do. Governors work and get things done. Governors say, tell me the objective, and we're going to make sure that we accomplish the objective. And so for people who are concerned, I just want to be very clear on something. And come November, we've got a binary choice. And the binary choice is between someone who has continually delivered for us and our states and the people of our states, and frankly, someone whose vision for the future of this country is downright dangerous. And so I would tell people it is time to mount up. And it is time to get serious and understand what's at stake.
All right, Wes Moore yesterday with several other governors meeting at the White House. Now let's head over to CNN, where Christiane Amanpour had Heather Cox Richardson on. Many of you read and support her on Substack, are subscribers of her. She is a very respected political historian. And Christiane Amanpour asked her about the Supreme Court decision and what she thinks it means. Heather Cox Richardson does not hold back. Here now, Christiane Amanpour and her jarringly British accent.
First and foremost, the Supreme Court decision essentially throwing the case on Trump's immunity back to the lower courts and somehow being unable to decide whether or not the president is immune on certain issues. How do you read that decision coming at the very end of their term?
I think it's important to remember two things. First of all, by delaying that decision as long as they did, they made sure that, in fact, former President Donald Trump would not see a trial before the upcoming election, putting a really big thumb on the scale for that election. So that's an important thing to remember. It's also important to remember that it comes after two other big decisions, one that threw out the Chevron doctrine, and one that essentially okayed bribery so long as the exchange of money or favors came after an official had decided something. So in the space of a week, we've had the idea that essentially bribery, they call it gratuities, but essentially it's bribery after the fact, was established by the Supreme Court. And next we got what is essentially the throwing out of the modern state, the regulatory American state, which will dramatically benefit the very wealthy and corporations. And now we have the idea that, in fact, the president is immune from prosecution for things he did as what he calls official acts. This is a coup. It's a coup, and that's a legal coup in our system. And it is, as you say, interesting that it's happening right before July 4th, when, of course, the founders of what would become the United States published the Declaration of Independence that said that the United States would not have a king.
All right. Well, that was pretty succinct and concise and scary. Heather Cox Richardson yesterday on CNN. Now let's head into the White House briefing room, where President Biden's spokeswoman, Karine Jean-Pierre, has one of the hardest jobs in America right now. And this was a weird moment yesterday where veteran White House reporter from NBC, Kelly O'Donnell, was asking straightforward questions, and somebody made a rude remark about whether or not President Biden was awake right now. And Kelly O'Donnell scolds that other reporter and continues on.
He's absolutely running.
Yeah. Well, he's saying that, and I'm sharing with you his view.
And we would invite the president to come here and tell us that directly.
Noted, Kelly.
But he's awake. That's inappropriate.
As you heard from your colleague, the president of the WHA, that's inappropriate. Thank you, Kelly.
I thought that was a little bit dramatic, and we might see more of it. But here's a longer moment or statement from the White House and the press briefing room yesterday. His spokeswoman, Karine Jean-Pierre.
ABC, as you know, with George Stephanopoulos, one of your colleagues. That's not scripted. And he has done more than 40 interviews that have not been scripted. Interviews do not have a script this year alone. So you'll see him out there engaging with the American people, and I think that's important.
But again, we're now almost a week after the debate. Why doesn't the president just come here right now and answer for himself with this briefing room all of the questions that we have?
You asked me a couple things. You asked when is he going to be unscripted? He has been. When he went to visit a diner in a couple of days ago at the Waffle House, when he met with some of the supporters in Atlanta, North Carolina, where hundreds of supporters showed up. He certainly had an opportunity to engage. On Friday, he's going to be taking some questions from one of your colleagues. I think that's going to be important, and we're going to continue to engage with all of you. We're going to certainly looking forward to doing that. He'll have a press conference next week at NATO press conference, a big boy press conference, as Justin from Bloomberg stated yesterday. And so we'll do that, and he's looking forward to it.
And Karine, President Biden has always promised to tell the American people the truth. So can you be straight with us and the American people? Is the president clear-eyed about what it takes to stay in the race and what it would take for him to drop out?
The president is clear-eyed, and he is staying in the race. I don't have anything else beyond that. He's staying in the race. That is what the president is promised to do. That is what he wants to continue to work on, the successes that he's had. His record is unprecedented record, and that is what the president is focused on, continuing to deliver for the American people. And he looks forward to doing that.
All right, well, President Biden did make a statement or an appearance yesterday at the Medal of Honor ceremony, so this is a little bit of what that sounded like when he was giving out those citations.
Let me end with this. Tomorrow is the 4th of July. Another reminder of why it's so important to know our history, not to erase our history, to remember the sacred cause of American democracy, and not make up a lost cause to justify evil of slavery, to remember the nation that George and Philip fought for and died for, the United States of America. That's who we are. That's who we are. The United States of America, there's nothing beyond our capacity in the United States if we work together. So God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. And with that, it's my honor to ask the military to read the citations.
All right, there you go. President Biden yesterday at the Medal of Honor ceremony. That's what it sounded like. Now, let's go over to MSNBC, where Nicole Walsh plays a clip of Jamie Raskin from her colleague Chris Hayes' show. I don't know why I did it this way.
As elected Democrats try to figure out what comes next, listen to how Congressman Jamie Raskin, one of the Democratic Party's most influential voices, describes this moment to our colleague Chris Hayes.
There will be lots of discussion and lots of people weighing in, and I know this is a moving target. It's got to happen quickly, but I can guarantee you, Chris Hayes, there will be massive unity and focus on that task when we get to the end of this process.
All right, there you go. That was yesterday at MSNBC. Here's how it sounded for Jake Tapper on his show yesterday afternoon on The Lead. This is like a 3-minute setup, which I think gives some context, some reporting. You might not like him. You might like him. Here it is.
President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris joined a call with their campaign staff. A source described it as a, quote, pep talk. Biden told staffers, quote, let's go win this, unquote. But can he? That's one of the very real fears I've heard from House Democrats in background conversations I held today. One Democratic member of Congress told me that their phones hadn't stopped ringing. They say there's a clear split in the House Democratic caucus. Those who seem to have a close relationship with President Biden want to stay the course. Others are all too ready to back Vice President Harris as the nominee. Quote, polling of House members is cratering. This House Democrat says about the congressional races they're all running. They're all running for re-election, of course. Quote, we are all outperforming the president, but that's not sustainable, unquote. A second House Democrat that I spoke with told me that they had to leave the room just a few minutes into the debate Thursday night during Biden's, quote, "we finally beat Medicare," unquote, answer. They had to leave the room because their blood pressure went through the roof, they said. House Democrat 2 then sat in the kitchen drinking for the rest of the debate. This was the first time this Democrat thought, wow, not only could Biden lose, I could too. Quote, "Every American knows what a confused older person looks like," this member of Congress told me. They went on to say that was a massive signal that he wasn't able to handle a future term. They also told me, quote, "I do not subscribe to the people who immediately were like, he should go, he should go, he should go. Nor do I subscribe to those who said, we need to support Joe Biden at all costs. That's what we have to do. I'm a logical person. Defeating Donald Trump is the only mission that counts," unquote. The member tells me that they don't want to make a knee-jerk reaction. They're waiting for more comprehensive, deeper polling data next week to see on whether Biden has any chance of winning in November and on which alternatives might be the strongest. This Democrat engages with Biden pretty regularly and says the debate performance, quote, "was more of an anomaly, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't get better. The chances of those things happening more frequently are going up, and it's not going down." A third House Democrat with whom I spoke told me they had believed wrongly what the campaign and White House had been saying about Biden's health, all the assurances. Now they tell me, quote, "I just want to beat Trump, and I don't think Biden can do that. No one has laid out a path to me. Barring that, we have to consider what we do." It's almost impossible to see anyone coming back from this, House Democrat number 3 told me, because this is something everybody understands. And as one person said to me, it goes slowly and then it goes quickly. When this House Democrat pushed campaign staffers that they had not been honest to Democrats, they were rebuffed. But this member of Congress told me, quote, "Sometimes when you're with someone every day who's declining, you don't see as clearly. You see what you want to see." Now, look, obviously, these are just the opinions of 3 Democratic lawmakers out of thousands. We know that President Biden has recently reached out to House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senator Chris Coons, his campaign co-chair, and there are still many Democrats who support Biden, including Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who said today on CNN that Biden, quote, "has the stamina and can do the job." The White House also said today that the president is, quote, "absolutely not thinking about stepping down." White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said that President Biden is, quote, "as sharp as ever," unquote. As sharp as ever, she said. She said that. But there is no doubt that conversations are going on amongst members of the Democratic Party, top members, about whether he is fit to serve another 4 years.
All right. Jay Tapper's reporting yesterday on CNN, and I don't think that Jay Tapper thinks that President Biden is as sharp as ever. That's what I think he was insinuating. He's not as sharp as ever. So here is Stacey Abrams talking to our friend Laura Coates last night.
Should Biden step aside? Should he remain on the ballot?
President Biden is our president. He will be our nominee, and he will be our president in 2025.
Seems like there's no harm in saying that, right? I mean, I guess that's the strategy. That's the messaging. No harm in saying it until President Biden decides himself to step down, that most people, a lot of people are just going to come out and support him and be surrogates for him until anything changes. I think that is the way forward, except for those who are insistent on calling him for him to step down. And I'm not going to be mad or outraged at either of these groups of people or of their thinking. I know some of you are, many people on the internet are. I am not. I'm letting this play out because I'm sorry, I don't have a strong opinion either way. I know when you host a show and to get more clicks and ratings and subscriptions, you're supposed to have a strong opinion. I don't, because I don't have a crystal ball. I think we all agree we do not want Donald Trump to come back in power, especially now with the Supreme Court ruling and the Supreme Court makeup. We all agree on that. And as long as we all agree on that, or most of us, then I'm going to not destroy relationships with people and call people names and get angry when nobody knows anything. That's my strong opinion. All right. Well, that's all the audio I've got for you and the headlines as well. Now it's time to get to my excellent guest. I talked to him about season 1 of his podcast. I think it was last year. And now I'm really excited to talk to him about season 2 of Extremely American, which is an inside look at Christian nationalism and the battle for the soul of an Idaho town. 3 episodes are up. I highly recommend you listen to this, as well as season 1, where he went inside a militia. It's Heath Druzin, who is a great reporter and has been for a while. He was Boise State Public Radio's Guns in America Fellow from 2018 to 2020, during which he focused on extremist movements, suicide prevention, and gun culture. Before that, he covered the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, veterans issues for Stars and Stripes newspapers, and government and crime for the Idaho Statesman. His work has been featured on NPR's Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and the BBC. And I was really happy to talk to him about season 2 of Extremely American. It's very, very well produced. I highly recommend you listen to both seasons of the podcast. They have 8 and then 9 episodes, I think this one does. I think you'll really like it. I think you'll love my conversation with Heath, who's a great guy. Let's do it right now with Heath Druzin. All right, there he is. Heath Druzin back with a second season of Extremely American. I've listened to the first 2 episodes, season 2, and I've listened to season 1. You guys do amazing, hopefully award-winning work. Congratulations on season 2 of your terrifying, but very well-reported podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, it's great to be back talking about this again. And the way politics are going, we might be talking about this for a long time.
Yeah, you've got your finger on the pulse of a very important issue underlying just about everything, a lot of things in politics, and certainly on the right in America. Let's talk just a little bit about season 1. So season 1, you went in and took a look at militias. Season 2, it's Christian nationalists. We could say there's a big overlap, but tell us a little bit more about season 1 in case listeners haven't listened to it.
Yeah, so season 1, it looked at the intersection of armed groups and kind of militia and militia adjacent groups, and the intersection with mainstream politics. So the reason I did season 1 was because I covered armed groups as part of my reporting, and I saw them becoming more important in politics and getting mainstreamed. That season, you hear from a lot of militia leaders around the country and some of the old school guys back in the Michigan militia days, Timothy McVeigh era. So you really get a sense of that. And season 1 we did as we were doing production, January 6th happened, and we're like, oh, this is even more relevant now. So that's a context of season 1 if you go back and listen to it. And then season 1 got more interest than I had even expected. And so we started talking about what would we do next. And that's when my whole thing is I want to cover groups that matter, right? I don't want to just cover fringe groups that nobody's paying attention to, and then all of a sudden I'm just giving kind of free publicity for a really obscure movement. Yeah. So I started seeing in my same rabbit holes with militias, Christian nationalism popping up a lot more. And what I really saw was elected officials start to parrot their talking points, and other elected officials really afraid to push back on them. And I was like, oh, I think this is starting to matter more. Like, these guys are everywhere, and they're starting to gain traction with ideas that 10 years ago or even less would have been an absolute no-go, whether Republican or Democrat. So that's why I started digging into this, and I found one of the main leaders of the Christian nationalist movement was right here in Idaho, where I live, and an interesting story about that church in a small town wrapped in a bigger story about American theocracy, which is what these guys want.
That's not an interesting story. You're underselling. It's fascinating. This guy, Doug, what's his last name?
Doug Wilson is the pastor of Christ Church, which is at the center of the podcast.
Let me go back for a second here and ask you the question that some people might have, which is, do you ever worry that telling their stories, sharing their ideas, spreads their ideas? I don't. I believe that your work is creating transparency and helping fight apathy. I think it's really important what you're doing. Do people make that accusation, that critique? What do you say to people who say you're going on NPR and you're sharing these very radical religious fundamentalist people's ideas? And are you worried that you will be spreading their propaganda?
So I think it's a totally reasonable question. I do get it a lot. Usually it's like, how do you balance that? And it's a tightrope. So I ask myself that question all the time, which is why I was saying I want to make sure it matters before I start doing a deep dive. I'm interested in this stuff, so I have to check myself because I like going down these rabbit holes. I'm weird. So yeah, it's a totally reasonable question, but I think you need look no farther than the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, who has said there's no separation of church and state, to know that these ideas have risen really fast up the ranks and are being accepted by people in really high places. So whether or not I do this podcast, these guys have national reach, as you'll see in the podcast. And they have, my reporting partner coined it, a Christian industrial complex that they've built up. And they're going right around mainstream media and reaching people directly and having a big impact.
Are you familiar with Jeff Charlotte's work?
Yeah.
He was digging into the intersection between elected politicians in Congress in Washington, D.C. and fundamentalist Christians a long time ago. This stuff used to be happening a lot quieter, but now it's all out in the open. And do you think that's a fair characterization? Yeah.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's not a mystery where it's coming from. 2016 happened, Trump got elected, and these guys a lot of them don't actually like Trump, but they see him as a vehicle for getting their ideas enacted. And he has been, and he's signaled that he will be again if he gets reelected.
They're in it for the justices, right? They're in it for the courts.
And actually, here's something interesting. A lot of the guys I talked to said, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016, but I'm going to vote but I voted for him after, and I voted for him again because I saw that I didn't trust him, and then he got the justices in there. So you nailed it. That's a big part of it. And that's a big part of why they're being more vocal now. They see an opening, right? They see that this is their time, and they're smart. These guys are smart. They know when they have a chance, and they know that moment might not last.
Yes. We learned that especially in season 2, how smart they are because of basically what they're doing in this town in Moscow, Idaho. And so it's a fool's errand to dismiss their intelligence just because you disagree with their extreme beliefs. I think it's fair to say. The obvious question is the connection or the overlap between who you covered in season 1, these militias, and who you're covering now, Christian nationalists who are basically trying to take over a town, the country, the state, the country, and the planet with their version of Christian nationalism. And you mentioned January 6th. I was surprised, because I'm naive, to see the overlap with this overt Christian nationalism or Christianity on that day. So many of those guys were very religious and very overt about it. What is the overlap between the militia members and the Christian nationalists, those who aren't necessarily members of militia that are going through legitimate ways of opening schools and businesses? It would seem there's a huge overlap. How much of the militia members are not also Christian?
So there isn't. There certainly is an overlap, and a lot of these guys swim in the same waters. And there are plenty of militia members who would consider themselves Christian nationalists or believe in those ideas. And there are plenty of Christian nationalists who are supportive of militias, if not part of it. However, I will say there's also, just like anything in these far-right movements, there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of fractures. And so there is a pretty strong part of the militia movement that actually wants nothing to do with this. And they're like, whoa, we don't want your Christian magistrate running the show here. When we say we believe in the Constitution, we believe in the separation of church and state and that as well, even though a lot of militia members will say things about the Constitution that the general public overall probably doesn't agree with. So there's definitely overlap. And on January 6th, there were a lot of Christian nationalist symbols at the insurrection. There's no doubt about that. But they are definitely distinct movements, even though some of them might be in both. So I'll give you the big example for this season is nobody I talked to that I know of, and I'm pretty sure that nobody I talked to was in a militia. Now, it came up, and January 6th was downplayed often. Again, there's a connection, there's an overlap, there's a affinity. A lot of these guys see militias as a nice check on the government because they are certainly no fans of the government and Christian nationalism, or at least not the government as it is now. They want their own theocracy, right? And to be honest, they say they want small government. In some ways, it's a very big government. In some ways, it's a small government. They want the government to control a lot of aspects of your private, your intimate life, even though they want less sort of red tape. So
that detail is one of the most important details. The nuance and granularity with which you talk and with which your podcast is produced is really important for people because it's so easy to dismiss people and it's so easy to categorize people and put them all in the same category. And we shouldn't do that because it does a disservice for a lot of different reasons in trying to understand and trying to fight back against it for sure. That's for sure. To fight back against theocracy. Also, their understanding or feelings around democracy and civics. What did you learn about that? Because I wish we lived in a country where we all agreed the person who wins the election, even if we don't like the way it was run or we don't like the electoral college or whatever, they won. Now we live in a country where even in lower level elections, you have people denying the outcome of an election, and therein lies the health of a democracy. So what are their thoughts about our current state of democracy and civics in general?
They're not fans. So this is maybe the most important part of the podcast for people to understand. Whatever your viewpoint, what you need to know is that these guys don't like democracy. They say they don't like democracy. Very much what they say is this country is a republic. It's not a democracy. And what they mean by that is that they take a sort of dim view of universal voting rights. I'll give you a good example that half the country will at least, hopefully everybody in the country, but half the country will especially be interested in the fact that they don't believe the 19th Amendment was correct. And that, of course, granted women the right to vote. So almost every Christian nationalist I talk to essentially wants to disenfranchise almost all women in the country. Now, that's not how they put it. What they say is, we want household voting. And when you push them on it, you're like, so what you mean is the head of the household casts the vote? Yes, in consultation with the household. But ultimately, the head of the household in a married couple's home is the man. Yes. So they're like, women get to vote through their husband, which, of course, look, I want to be fair to everybody, but I can say straight out that that's just bullshit. They don't get to vote. Like, you got to be honest that women don't get to vote in the system unless you get widowed. So you can wait for it and eventually you might get to vote because then you're technically the head of your household. But
what if you kill your husband so you can vote? No, but here's the thing. In the, I think, first episode, you have this conversation. It's important that people understand that you're not just reporting, you're asking the right question and giving pushback in both season 1 and season 2 to some people would say, or how is that consistent with, you ask all the right questions. And basically what he says is if the woman votes one way and the man votes another way, we're just canceling them out, each other's votes out anyway. So we should consolidate our vote. It's a twisted logic. You push back perfectly on it. The listener is left with only one conclusion, which is in this guy's version of America, Doug Wilson in Christchurch, which we'll get into, women should not be voting unless they're widowed or yet unmarried, I think was a caveat, which I don't know.
Very specific exceptions, but for the most part, most women wouldn't. And the canceling, there's some clever wordplay they use where they're like, you cancel each other's vote out. But if you think about it, you're like, isn't that democracy? You vote for one person, I vote for another. It's not canceling it out. It's casting a vote and casting different votes. And Pete, if you vote for somebody and I vote for the other person, as far as I can tell, that's how it's supposed to work. Yeah, that part, I pushed back on that because it was like, let's just be honest about what this is. It's disenfranchising women and it's stacking the deck in a way because women, as a group, women are clearly not a monolith, but as a voting bloc, tend to not vote overall in the ways that a lot of these Christian nationalists would like to vote.
So this season takes place in where you live, Idaho. Well done.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that.
You just froze. I don't know what happened, but I'll fix it in post.
Okay.
This season takes place in Idaho, where you live, in a town called Moscow. And it is a fascinating story, what is happening there. Tell us more about Doug Wilson, who I've just touched on, and some really important characters that we are introduced to in the first 2 episodes. And it's crazy, too, because when you're listening to a podcast, when you're listening to someone like you reporting and interviewing them, they can come off as likable. They're people are complex. People are not just one thing and not just one belief. So it's very interesting to hear him in his own words. I'm glad he was very open with you. This guy years ago founded his own school of extreme Christian beliefs and now his own college. And there's a whole bunch of people in the town that have gone there. And you explain the story. Who is he and what are some of his, by the way, extreme beliefs?
So Doug Wilson is the pastor of Christ Church, and he also is the founder of a broader religious community called the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches, which has churches in almost every state and several foreign countries. He is based in Moscow, Idaho, and Moscow is this like really quaint college town of about 26,000 people. It's got the University of Idaho, which is this late 19th century kind of flagship public school there. So this town is Idaho, you might not be surprised to know, is a pretty Republican state. This town, though, is a blue dot. Pretty liberal, like you go there downtown and a lot of pride flags, Black Lives Matter placards. But then you also see these kind of Christian nationalist flags, these white flags with a red cross on them that Christian nationalists have adopted. And what's happening is Doug Wilson has stated that he wants to make Moscow town. He wants his town to be run by Christian principles. And a big part of the strategy is that the church and its allies have been buying up big swaths of land and key parts of downtown. My reporting partner, James Dawson, and I, we looked at that, and James looked at property records. And our estimate, and it could be low, to be honest, because our estimate is only what we could confirm. About 20% of downtown is now owned by either Christ Church, its members, or supporters. That's a lot. And some real key real estate, like right in the heart of everything. So there's a lot of people in Moscow who do not agree with this church. And this church is a fundamentalist patriarchal church. They believe that women should be obedient to men. Wives should be obedient to husbands, and that women in general should be in the home. And they have some very stark ideas about how society should run. They basically, if you're in the LGBTQ community, you would have to go underground in their ideal America. You can't have open same-sex relationships. And yeah, Doug Wilson he's led it all. He's led it for decades, and he's slowly been building this up. He's really played the long game, and he's smart. And you'll hear it more as the season goes on. But he also has some very odd ideas. Odd's not the right word. I got to be honest. He's got some offensive ideas about slavery and the Civil War. And you find this current in Christian nationalism where there's this kind of revisionist history where all of a sudden the South are if not the good guys, and often the good guys, at least the North is the aggressor. The South did nothing wrong. Slavery isn't as bad as you thought. I will say Doug Wilson says he is not a fan of slavery, he says, but he does say directly to me, but I absolutely don't think it's as bad as most people think. So these are the kind of like ideas where I think it'll raise a lot of eyebrows when you hear that. And they're not shy about it, to be honest.
People that may have heard that might need a moment. Not as bad as some people think. And the people in town who know who Doug Wilson is, most folks there, probably know more than anything else about his writings on slavery. That seems to be what he is known for in terms of his greatest or worst hits. Everybody seems to know what he thinks about that. Are there people of color who are members of his church or who support him or who are business owners? It's Idaho, so I'm guessing there's very few people of color, but I don't know. I've never been, and I've certainly never been to Moscow. It is a college town. Are there any people of color that are in his congregation, go to his school, send their kids to his school? Did you hear or see anything about that?
Yes, as usual, it's complicated. Now, There's not a lot of people of color, but there are people of color who are in his church, in his orbit. There's a very prominent black man named David Shannon who goes by Chocolate Knox on his show. And I won't get into it, but Knox is an old Protestant philosopher who they really love. Anyway, you can go all the way down the rabbit hole. But yeah, so he's a really prominent member and a media personality. He's a co-host of one of this sort of Christian nationalist politics show that I'll get into in the season that's very popular. And yeah, it's not 100% white. It is a pretty white church, but to be fair, Idaho is a pretty white state. Yes, there are some people of color in there, not many, but they support Doug Wilson and but people in town.
I found him and he's the Tim Scott. I immediately have decided everything about this guy that you described, the Chocolate Knox guy, who's got a big following, has his own show. And it's women can serve patriarchy and white folks can serve black folks can serve white supremacy, and that's how I see it. And I would be hard to convince otherwise in this case. I don't know. I'm making judgments and assumptions. I'll have to wait till that episode comes out because you're the guy who explains stuff with so much nuance, but not that surprising. So we learned so much in the first two episodes, and it's all happening in this town. And there's this other guy who's a really important player who wouldn't speak to you for the podcast named Andrew Krapuschetz, who is also a real important player. They are powerful, wealthy, influential people in this movement, just in this town to take it over. And I think that matters as a result of the rest of the state house, because we've seen now the 10 Commandments are in schools in Louisiana, the Secretary of Education in Oklahoma, this alley cat, as Joe Biden would call him, with the Bible in the school. It's happening all over the country. Take us back, though, to Moscow. Tell me about Krapuschetz and how hard it must have been to grown up with that name, Krapuschetz.
Yeah, I didn't get to ask him that because he was one of the few people who didn't talk to us for this. But he's all over the web giving talks, and so we were able to really fill in a lot of the blanks. So Andrew Krapuschetz is one of the, if not the wealthiest man in Moscow, Idaho. So he's got a lot of money. And that's a big thing with this church. There's a lot of money that they're able to throw around. And it's a small town, right? What's interesting about Krapuschetz is he's right downtown. His offices, what he runs is what he calls an anti-woke job board called Red Balloon. And it
touted by Donald Trump Jr. you shared with us.
Yes, you will hear Donald. What's that?
It's just not it's a big company. It's a great brand. What is it? No woke hiring. No.
Yeah. And it's a smart move in that world at this time. If that's what you believe, then it's certainly capturing kind of the moment on the right. And yeah, Donald Trump Jr. is in one of his ads. The guy has some influence well outside of Moscow, and he's building a big housing development in town. And that's got people worried. Because depending on who buys it, and obviously the worry is that a lot of church members are going to buy it. It's going to change the demographics of town potentially, and a lot of people see it as the tip of the iceberg. Right? This guy has the money to do housing developments, and in a town of 26,000 people, where by the way 10,000 are students who probably aren't very active in local politics, then you can really start to change things with just a few developments as far as the voting population.
It's, I think, one of the most fascinating parts of what you've done so far with these first two episodes is talking to everybody in a town. It's really scary. I'll be honest, it's a bit depressing to hear a town like this categorizing each other. You're constantly looking to see if the person across the street that runs the business, the restaurant, the person at the grocery store is on your team or the other. And they have names for each other, and they have flags. They have ways of virtue signaling all sides. And you talk to them, and it's becoming like that to some extent in my town over the school board fights. I'm afraid when I go to certain places that I'm going to see certain people that yelled at me and called me a pedophile to school board because I supported LGBT kids. Like that's happening in towns all over the country, but it's very overt here. And you show us that with great reporting. Tell us what it's like there in Moscow for business owners, for homeowners, for residents of the town, the way that they see each other.
What's fascinating about Moscow and what's happening there is that almost all of this is happening in like a 6-block area downtown. It's just a small town, and they've got a really cool downtown. And we actually take you across downtown in the podcast, and like you walk across it in about 5 minutes if you want to go just end to end. There's a ton going on there, but everybody's right on top of each other. And so you've got the people in town and the church members. They call church members kirkers. And that goes back to the Scottish word for church. And anyway, it's a whole thing. But kirkers are the Christ Church members.
And they call themselves kirkers. So it's not even pejorative. It's interesting how that developed. You got to listen to the podcast to see. But everybody agrees they're the kirkers. And once you have a name and an identity, and as you know far better than I do about how things unfold, it's this team or that team. Kirkers.
Yep. And the kirkers dress differently than people in town, so you can spot them if you spend a little time there.
Oh, really? What do they wear?
It's Christian hipster. Like they wear nice clothes, like, expensive flannelly clothes, often nice shoes, often like expensive cowboy boots. It's a mix, right? They're not a monolith, but you can spot them. And people in town, they're walking by each other all the time. And there's a whole movement in town basically to not patronize, to boycott Kirker connected businesses. So there's a real split, right? Some people will not shop at anything that's connected to Christ Church. They've had a list out of places to avoid and like explanations.
But it doesn't seem to be hurting, according to your reporting, the Kirker businesses. The guy who owns the brewery restaurant seems to be like most people maybe don't care that much about what the owner believes. They just want a beer.
I'm sure Tapped, this place that is owned by a Christ Church member who talked to us at length. We're very appreciative of. They were doing well. And so I don't know how much it hurts them. There was another business that went out of business after complaining that they were being hurt by the boycott. It's very hard to quantify, of course. But I think as Christ Church grows, and it has been growing, it becomes less and less important to bring in non-supporters. Because I think people in Christ Church are very good at supporting each other, right? It's a tight community. And you can say what you will about the beliefs, but they do stick together in general.
Yeah, that's often the case. What do they think of other Christians? I think one of the hardest things in America around this conversation of Christian nationalism, I know listeners of my podcast feel that they've been very clear with me, and I always try to be transparent. We're not talking about you. Lots of people are Christian or all kinds of different denominations or Catholic or others as well. And they don't necessarily want to be painted. I'll paint the Catholics, and I do. I was one. I have the credibility. The point is, nobody wants to be painted by another denomination's belief necessarily. But my question is, what do the Kirkers, the members of Christ Church, believe of Catholics, of Methodists, of other Christian denominations who don't share their specific core set of extreme, I'll say, beliefs?
This is an extremely important point. This podcast is not about, look at these Christians, look at Christians and what they're doing. This podcast is about a specific movement, Christian nationalism, which frankly is not supported by the majority of Christians in the country. When you look at Christ Church and this strain of Christian nationalism, that's a very strict Protestant, it's actually largely Calvinist belief system. They have a pretty dim view of a lot of other Christian denominations. Catholicism, they are not fans. They don't think that's the right way to do Christianity. Mormons, I was told that Mormons are actually polytheists, that they're pagans essentially. Now, Mormons obviously don't agree with that. They consider themselves Christians. So they really only see a narrow band of Christian belief systems as true Christianity. And I think that's important for people to understand, that they're not even really trying to be a big tent. They think that a lot of other Christian denominations should repent and change.
Man, it is really important and fascinating to hear their point of view throughout this. What are the goals and how long is the game? Because you're looking at Moscow, Idaho. So it's easy for listeners across the nation to be like, yeah, it's fucking Idaho. It's that town. That's scary. And I don't like the momentum there. But that's not going to happen in my town. Or is it? I think it's fair to say in all different kinds of towns, small, medium, and large across the country, there is some movement of Christian nationalists. And furthermore, as you mentioned earlier, they're in positions of power right now. And they're holding back, if anything, not only the Speaker of the House, but one might now clearly argue members of the Supreme Court, Samuel Alito for sure, and others going along with him. And certainly Trump is gathered support overwhelmingly from the Christian nationalist movement, I think it's fair to say. What is the long game for the members of Christ Church and Douglas Wilson in Idaho? And how do you see the larger Christian nationalist movement?
Yeah. So as the season unfolds, you'll hear that we start to pan out a little to a more national view, because while it starts in Christchurch and it's a really interesting story there, what you find out is that Doug Wilson and really the broader Christian nationalist movement has big plans for the country. They want to turn America into a theocracy, and they're having success. As you mentioned, they're having success. We'll actually take you from Moscow all the way to Kentucky to it's almost a Christian nationalist festival. And it brings people from all over the country who have the same beliefs to basically compare notes and plot the takeover of the country for Christian nationalist ideas. And I think a great example of how close we're getting to some of these ideas potentially being adopted is Project 2025, which is some former Trump administration officials have this plan, if Trump gets reelected, to really radically change the way the country works. And one of their bullet points, a literal bullet point on their blueprint, was Christian nationalism. And I'll tell you, one of the guys, I spoke to him off the record. He didn't want to go on the record, but he was at this Kentucky conference, and his name is William Wolf. He's a former Trump administration official, a senior official. If Trump gets elected, he's very likely to be an official again. And he is very direct that he wants Christian nationalist principles to run America, and that he's working hard to make it happen. And they're ready. If Trump wins, that's the thing. They're playing the long game. They have all the patience in the world, right? They see this as a literal mission from God. So they'll wait as long as they want, but they also think that they might not have to wait that long. Yeah. And if Trump wins, they are ready to get started right away as soon as the inauguration happens. And I think people might not be taking that seriously enough, because it's getting real, and I think it's a real possibility right now that not that they could necessarily get everything they want in right away, but they could start chipping away at some of the democratic foundations that we really take for granted here, and we probably shouldn't take for granted anymore.
What about violence? Again, going back to season 1 and season 2, you talk to these guys, they don't seem to be interested in hostile takeovers. They want to do it through other means. Do you believe them? Do you see some type of middle path where there are some hostile takeovers? There are night raids and smaller militias and some people have said death squads and that kind of stuff that we've seen in history. Do you see any of that? Do they whisper about it?
The folks I talked to, Doug Wilson, chief among them, they denounced violence, and they said that violence is not the way to achieve their goals. Now, the flip side of that is that they do use a lot of violent metaphors and imagery. They talk about how this is a cultural war. Doug Wilson talks about his students being human munitions. So there is a lot of violent language. Now, again, they said we don't advocate violence. One arguable exception to that is William Wolf, the former Trump administration official I talked about, who's really actively working on getting Christian nationalist principles in the next administration. Now, he has certainly talked in a way that I think a reasonable person could think is advocating for taking up arms against the current secular regime. he has definitely raised the specter of civil war. And that's where it starts to get scary, where some of these guys start talking about civil war and you're like, okay, all it takes is one person to be like, hey, the stakes are so high. They're talking about pedophiles. They're talking about all of these, like getting into conspiracy theories. And it just takes one person to be like, I need to take action when they hear that stuff. And I think that's where it makes people nervous.
That's an understatement. People hearing you are more than nervous, but we've seen it. We've seen it obviously playing out throughout the country. It's interesting because I covered you were in where? Iraq, Afghanistan for Stars and Stripes?
Yeah. I spent a few years there. Yeah.
I covered the quote war on terror and Muslim extremist threats in America. And do you ever think about, I almost don't want to say it out loud, but how fascinating it is how few of those types of Muslim extremists, jihadist, foreign terrorist threats are even plotting, much less taking place, versus the domestic white supremacist Christian nationalist terrorists. You covered the militia movement in season 1. And how closely do you think that the FBI is watching these domestic terrorists? How worried are you about there are many of these true Christian nationalist believers within the federal government, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, et cetera? Do you think about the guardrails in the institutions of our security apparatuses protecting us from the terrorist threat within? How do you think about that?
Yeah, and I'll quickly just say the folks I talk to on the Christian nationalist side of my podcast, again, not advocating for violence openly, anything like that. However, as far as white nationalist threats and threats from the far right in general, I think the federal government slept on that for a long time. And that was a bipartisan thing. There was Republican and Democratic administrations that really slept on it and even pushed back on people who were sounding the alarm. And I cover that in season 1. There's one person in particular who I talked to who basically predicted what was going to happen during the Obama administration. And the administration was like,
well, didn't the DHS secretary, what's her name, Napolitano, put out a warning about domestic terrorists and then some veterans, and then she got so much outrage and pushback, I think mainly from the right, that they'd like to withdraw it? That's all I remember.
Yes, I want to be careful about the details there, but because I don't remember exactly. But yes, there was that report, and they did get exactly the kind of pushback you're talking about. So, there is a real threat, especially from white nationalist groups. And the government's been sleeping on it for a while. I don't think they are anymore. I think they are taking that more seriously. Part of the problem that we're having is some folks on the right don't want to discuss that or talk about it we're offended that you would say this.
I'll go a lot further. That is the entire problem. I'm just looking this up. This is back in 2011. Homeland Security Department curtails homegrown terror analysis. That was all politics. Like, she identified a real threat and people were deeply offended and still are when you talk about law enforcement or veterans. Like, it's not talk about political correctness. There's a lot of bad people in law enforcement and the veterans community who do bad things to their own families, to themselves, to others in the name of this extremism often. And you have to call it out for what it is based on the data. And you mention the data and people get crazy. They put out a bulletin. DOJ put out a bulletin saying that certain parents were getting dangerous and threatening board members, like in my town. And they put out this bulletin, and then they twisted it to say, you're saying we're terrorists. You're threatening to kill the members of the board. That's all we're warning about. But the political correctness of it on the right is, I think, it makes it very hard to be honest. Okay, off my soapbox. You don't need to comment necessarily on that, Heath, but I did want to mention that. Listen, I'll let you go. I could keep talking to you about this. The podcast is fascinating. Season 1 is so important. Season 2, I'm not going to say it's more important. They go hand in hand. This is really important journalism that you're doing. It's brave. It's not easy. And I really respect the work that you guys have done on this. I'm glad it's being platformed by NPR and Idaho Public Radio, right?
Boise State Public Radio is my partner, and NPR is distributing. And I appreciate that. And a quick plug that every Wednesday we'll have a new episode. So you can catch up right now, and then you can get a new episode coming your way.
I've subscribed. I'm fully in. Everybody else should too. Extremely American. Follow Heath. All the links in the show notes. Heath, great work. And I will hopefully talk to you again at the end of the season or sooner, whenever you want, man. It's always really important to talk to you, and I appreciate you very much.
Great talking to you again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, there he goes. Heath Druzin, everybody. Extremely American, episode 2. All of the information on Heath, his work, and the podcast are in the show notes for today. I cannot do this show without your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. On Independence Day would be a great day to subscribe or upgrade your subscription. Thanks so much for listening. It's just a note that I'm here as much as I can be, and hopefully you are supporting that. And if you are, I am so grateful. You bumblebees, I know you are. And that's it. That's all I've got. I'll be back tomorrow. Looks like I'll have JL Covan joining me to recap the week, and we'll get back after it. So be careful with those fireworks. Don't lose any eyes or fingers or anything, or just don't use them at all. Sorry about your dogs, and happy birthday, America. It may be your last. Jon Carroll, take us out.
Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you gotta stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest